Welcome, everyone. My name is Piper Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Stories Change Power, and we are so glad that you're here today, especially on a Black Friday, making time on a holiday weekend. This is a monthly series, and if you've joined us before, you know that we always include music to welcome you. And I'm hoping that some of you might be familiar with the story of the song we selected today, One Love. We will include resources after this webinar, and I'll try not to say that phrase 1,000 times, but there will be a lot of resources to share, including the story behind the song One Love. In short, it is a story of transcending partisan politics and a call for healing, which feels incredibly relevant today, especially in light of the shooting of the National Guard's members and so many things that are going on that feels particularly relevant the day before Thanksgiving here in the United States. There's a lot of transcending of partisan politics and healing to do, and our focus today includes elements of both. I'll share more insight in just a moment before we turn to today's presentation, but first, a very few quick housekeeping reminders. Number one, we have captions, so please use those if they are helpful to you. Number two, we will keep the chat open throughout today's presentation, but that is only for our human friends. The chat is not included in the recording that we share, and we take that pretty seriously. So if you are AI, we will kick you out. You are welcome to watch the recording. If we have any doubt, we'll check with you first. So keep an eye for your direct chat. If we don't hear back a response, then we'll err on the side of caution. And again, you can watch the recording, which will not include the chat. Number three, Q&A. You should see a little box at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. Please put your questions there anytime. If we don't have time to reach them today, we will loop back to you, including through LinkedIn with a feature that we call bonus points, anything that we can't fit in our hour today. And fourth, you are off camera and off mic. So I hope if you are joining us with your leftovers, bon appetit. Personally, I had a bowl of green bean casserole for breakfast this morning. So be comfortable, take care of yourself, and just tune in to what we're sharing today. So back to the other insight that I wanted to share with you, and that is the meaning of the Stories Change Power logo, which you can see back behind me. Across the country today, many are seeing and feeling a deepening of political divides. And as we'll touch on in a moment, the reality is that our views are actually much closer than many of us think. Still, people are feeling divided and isolated. People are hurting and angry and feel really disillusioned. And that is deeply troubling because we know that disillusionment with a current form of government drives openness to other forms of government. Some people are talking about a U-turn, which is a reference to times other countries began to transition toward authoritarianism, but then returned to democracy. Here at Stories Change Power, we are not thinking about U-turns because that suggests that we're going back to what we had before. And in reality, we can't, and in many ways, we don't want to. I think we can all agree that our history as a country is complicated. And for some folks, that might sound kind of harsh. For others, that might sound like a vast understatement. Either way, we can agree that the systems that we've inherited are flawed. And for those of us around who are here today, we have the chance to improve them, which is why instead of looking for that U-turn as we head into 2026 and beyond, we are looking more to move to the next loop. And what I mean by that, there's a theory of change called the two loops model. And the clearest example of this model is a change of seasons, which I think many of us are seeing outside our windows today. You may assume that spring, winter, fall, summer are all in a circle. In actuality, the preparation for the next season, a preparation for spring, is underway before fall and winter have even finished. The leaves aren't finished falling, and we're already preparing for spring. In other words, there's a new system that is beginning before the last has ended. And all of the resources of one system, all of the pieces of the leaves, all of the elements are all going to end up in that next system. And so odds are, if you are here today on your holiday weekend, it is because you see the current system, this red and blue loop. Let me see if I've got that the right direction there. You see that that system isn't working. And the yellow loop is the next loop. It's where we envision and create all of the new systems for our shared future before the current ones have even ended. And as you likely already sense as I'm explaining that, it's not easy work to both imagine and create something that doesn't exist yet. But we know that next system is going to emerge, and we want to be in the place where we're supporting a thriving for everyone without exception. If I went way too fast, if you're not understanding the two loops model, if you've got questions, again, happy to get to those in the Q&A. But welcome to the webinar and welcome to the yellow loop. In our time together, hopefully all that I just shared will become clearer. But first, I want you to hear from my friend and co-presenter, Mike Koenig. Mike is a jack of all trades, having served as vice chair of Holder Construction and now advising at Construction Ready. In addition to literal building, Mike sees the value in skill building and community building. He is a workforce development advocate who wants everyone to have the opportunity to build a fulfilling career and is a democracy advocate with a focus on ensuring every vote matters. Mike is a proud Rotarian, a director at NANNER, which is the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, a connector, a bridge builder, and a leader. Mike is integral to the movements to shape our shared future. Mike, welcome. And would you please share where you saw the need for this presentation that we'll be talking about today?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Koenig. Thanks for taking time. I want to add my thanks to taking time out of your holiday weekend to be with us. I've been involved in many of the movements that we're going to be touching on today for probably over 15 years. Movements that have shared the goal of strengthening our civil society, strengthening and protecting our democracy, well before you and I met, Piper, at Braver Angels Convention last year in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The idea for this session came from the involvement I've had with Rotary, specifically, where I've seen the way Rotary works. It's one of the largest civil organizations in the world with 46,000 clubs around the world. And most Rotary clubs meet weekly, and they limit their presentations often to about 20 minutes. So if we're going to help people that are outside of our movements be aware that the movements exist, people like members of Rotary, Rotary has a great model for that, but we have the challenge of trying to do that in only 20 minutes. So that's the challenge that we've taken on. One of the organizations I'm involved with specifically is NANNER, the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. NANNER is a coalition of organizations that many of you might be familiar with, dedicated to structural reforms. NANNER member organizations are imagining a better system, one that may not necessarily be widespread yet, but it's being tested in an increasing number of locations. They're working to create something better locally, at states, and also nationwide. You can see progress in places like New Mexico and Colorado that have more open primaries, states like Maine that use ranked choice voting, and places like Alaska that have reformed their campaign financing restrictions and also have a combined all candidate primary system. So most of us agree that the system is broken, but few are aware that there are solutions or even people working on possible solutions. I've been working on the ground among people in many of the over 11,000 organizations around the country, wanting to protect and renew our civil society and our representative form of government. And I realize we can be too in the weeds for people who aren't working on our specific issues every day to really understand and follow what we're talking about. At the same time, more and more people are growing concerned by the partisan division and hyperpolarization in our country, and people want to be part of the solution. So we wanted to create something anyone within our ecosystem of movements working to shape our shared future could use to explain and welcome people who aren't currently aware of our work or don't realize they already are or could be part of it. So for the past few months, you and I have been working together to create what we're going to share today for the first time.
Exactly. And in the next 30 minutes, we're going to try to answer the question that's been top of mind for so many people lately. And it's a number that feels like it's growing every day. And that question is, what can I do? Where can I start? How do I figure out how I can be part of the solution? Before we dive into that, I want to reiterate two things. First, as Mike mentioned, this is the first time we are sharing this presentation. It is debuting right now. So we will welcome your feedback in the Q&A as well as in the post-webinar survey. Second, this is designed for folks who are new to these movements, who are shaping are seeking to shape our shared future. So if you are joining and you are deep into the movement, welcome. We are so glad that you're here. We also ask that you listen as if you're brand new, put on that learning mindset, and don't worry if we don't mention your exact issue. If we do this right, you will see why we don't, and you'll see how to use this own presentation in your own work. So we'll jump into that in a second. First, I want to use a poll. Again, if you've joined us before, each month we have a poll. Even though the presentation today is a bit unusual, we're going to start with our first usual question that should be popping up. And the first question is, how long have you been a civic advocate? How long have you been using your civic muscle? And what I mean by that is somebody who's engaged in your community. Think broadly. If you are, you may have a strict definition for the word advocate. It may be something new where you're working in your neighborhood, your community, your country. And so I've got a question here. Are you new here? Have you been here a good while, a good long while? Maybe you're a pro, you've been here more than 10 years, or maybe you work in a different field and you don't really think about using your civic muscle. There's no wrong answer. We're just getting a sense of who's here. So I'm seeing some answers come in. Please put, cranberry sauce aside. Don't get it on your keyboard, as you're answering the poll. Second question, when you look around the country today, do you think that this is the best that we can do? And we've got four options here. Yes, this is the best that we can do. No, this isn't our best, but we're close. Third option, no, we have a long way to go. And fourth option, are you kidding me? Why are you even asking this question? So let's give folks, I see many responses coming in. We'll give folks a few more moments. Oh, great rush, you guys. I don't want to cut anybody off. We'll give everybody, let's say 3, 2, and if we don't get a chance to hear your answer, feel free to put that in the chat. But I'm going to end the poll now and share. And you'll see here that we've got a good mix, Mike. We've got almost half of folks are pros. We've got some folks who are brand new, some who've been here a good while, and then a few folks in a different field. So welcome, everybody. Really glad that you're here. And as we suspected, 80% of people say, no, we have a long way to go. And then a few folks saying, are you kidding me? Why do you even ask? So nobody thinking this is the best or that we're even close. So thank you, everyone. That gives us a sense of where we are. And yeah, I mean, again, it is Black Friday. If you thought we were doing the best we could, you'd probably not be logged in or watching the recording. So, spoiler alert, our shorthand way of answering that second question is yet another question. Are we doing the best we can? We answer with a question, is everyone everywhere in this country thriving? Without exception, is everyone thriving? And it is really important to emphasize that without an exception up front, because what we mean by better is a world where everyone can self-determine, everyone can have a safe life for themselves and their family. So just to be clear, any version that excludes anyone is not how we're defining better. Until we say yes to that question that everyone is thriving, our answer to the question, is this the best we can do, is no. We would love to hear what's top of mind for you when we talk about areas where we can improve. So please, pop those into the chat. And when we talk about where we can improve, we can mean us as a country, the United States. You may mean we, your state, your local community, your industry, a particular institution. We, for some of you, again, means some of the movements that we're about to describe. But we, Mike and I, encourage you to listen today with a we that's right for you, thinking about how you fit into that we. That's a lot of pronouns. I hope that all made sense. With that, Mike, let's jump into the presentation. I'll pull that up right now, and off we go.
So again, we want to give you the big picture here. We want to provide an overview of work that's already underway to reach that goal of the best we can do. We have 3 goals for today. The first is we want to give you the big picture, provide an overview of the work that's underway that's working on the solutions that we've talked about. The second goal is help you begin to figure out where you fit in and help you start to answer that question. And I want to emphasize start. Don't worry if you don't have 100% clarity today, especially if you're new. But we want to give you some ideas of where you might start to take some next steps. And after the webinar, we'll share a wide range of resources, including a map of organizations that are working on the solutions that we're talking about. So we welcome your input, and for those that are already working in the movements, as Piper said, we do value your feedback, and we do want to know, what do you think we missed? And so at the end, we'll ask, is there one thing we shared today that stands out to you or shifted your thinking? So keep that question in mind. Is there something that stood out to you or shifted your thinking?
One more thing before we dive into the meat of this, a quick word about words. We know that words matter. We want to ask your patience as we use a few words interchangeably. The first two, well, three, democracy and constitutional republic. We'll use democracy as a form of government that covers both of these concepts. Like so many words, these have taken a bit of a partisan bent. And we know there's a lot of great scholarship about the difference. But again, for ease of reference, we're going to use democracy to mean everything that's non-authoritarian. Mike and I are both members of Braver Angels. We volunteer with them. And so we use their language sometimes about red and blue being shorthand for people who tend to lean to the right or have more conservative views or tend to lean to the left, have more progressive views. We recognize that is binary, that can be limiting. All of us have more complex views than just those two, but you may hear us use that shorthand. And third, we are both cross-partisan and nonpartisan in our organizations. If you hear language that sounds otherwise, again, we really welcome your feedback after the presentation, but want you to keep those three things in mind. And with that, off we go.
It may seem like the only thing we agree on these days is that the government is broken. And it's often we're told it's the other side's fault and that we don't agree on anything. The good news is, as you can see here in a poll from Starts With Us, the perception of the other side is skewed. A government that's accountable, the rule of law, a representative government, even though we perceive we don't, we actually do share these values. So the point is, we actually do agree on many key beliefs. And then there's some more good news. A report that just came out, issued by Gallup and Kettering just a matter of a few days ago, confirms this. We'll share that in the resources later, as Piper said. Over 80% of us think that our political leaders should compromise to get things done. Political violence is never okay. The influence of money should be limited, etc. What we want you to take to heart right now is, not only is there way more we agree on than we disagree on, there is a lot of agreement when it comes to our democratic principles.
And so with that breath of fresh air, let's take a trip up into the air. You might have noticed that the description of today's webinar noted that we will fly through our shared past, present, and future in order to understand what's underway and where you can plug in. And fly was not just a reference to moving quickly, it is a reference to your point of view. So welcome to 50,000 feet. From here, we're going to take a quick look at our flight tracker, which shows our departure point. And of course, when we're talking about the United States, we could start at many points. We could start 15,000 years ago when people were thought to have crossed the Bering Land Bridge and first arrived in the Americas. We could start in August of 1619 when a Portuguese slave ship arrived at Port Comfort near Jamestown, Virginia. We could start in December of 1620 when the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We could start in January 4th of 1776 with the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. An anniversary we'll be celebrating next year, the 250th. We could start in April of 1861 with the start of the Civil War. For today, we are going to start at the turn of the 20th century. So you can just assume that we're taking a connecting flight. We're stopping right now to look back where we were about 100 years ago. And as David Eisner wrote in an article that, again, we'll share in the resources, we have faced major civic low tides before, like at the turn of the last century. Many people don't realize this, but shortly after the Industrial Revolution uprooted millions of people from farms and forced them into factory towns and crowded cities, there was a widening in our economic inequality. Politics was openly corrupt and trust was deeply, deeply fractured. We had racial terror across the country that was intensifying, particularly when Jim Crow laws were codified segregation. So with all of that in mind, what did we in the United States do? In short, we rallied, we rebuilt, we saw a swell of civic entrepreneurship. In the early 1900s is when we started seeing settlement houses beginning, which offered job training, arts programs, political education. That's when service clubs, which I confess I never thought about where they began. They'd always been around in my lifetime. Service clubs began like Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions were popping up all over the country, along with Elks Clubs, Moose, Knights of Columbus. The NAACP emerged, the National Urban League emerged, League of Women Voters was established. For youth, we saw Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H clubs, along with the expansion of the YMCA and the YWCA. That is all to say, the United States has a comeback spirit in our DNA, which is great news. But again, that was a long time ago. That was before World War II. Many of us don't know this history. And instead, we've been taking the strength of our democracy and our civic engagement for granted. And now we're all worried that it is not holding up.
So the next question then is, where are we going? What's our destination? I think of it as our shared North Star. For today, I'll sum up our destination in 4 words: thriving together, no exceptions. Thriving together, no exceptions. This comes from the Thriving Together framework, which is the one that if you have to pick just one, we would probably pick. The Thriving Together framework focuses on the conditions that allow people and places to thrive now and for future generations. In short, it emphasizes shifting from reactive, fragmented systems towards collaborative, regenerative ones by focusing on 7 interconnected vital conditions. You can see it on the screen. The vital conditions are the basic things every person and community needs in order to grow, stay healthy, and have a good life. You can see the 7 conditions, several of them. I'll highlight: meaningful work and wealth, opportunities to earn money, build savings, do work that matters. Basic needs for health and safety, having food, clean water, healthcare, housing, transportation. You get the idea. When all these conditions exist, when all these conditions are strong, people can do well and help each other. When even one is missing, becomes harder for everyone to thrive. So our destination is a country where all 7 conditions are met for everyone. Most of us agree that critical to achieving these vital conditions is having a healthy, functioning, representative government with elected officials feeling accountable to the people they represent.
So now we know where we want to go. The next question is, who's involved in getting us there? And the answer is there's a role for everyone. We need community members, we need government, business, philanthropy, all to work together over the long term and make investments of time, money, capacity that builds resilience and a shared well-being. To put that in more wonky speak, we need cross-sector partners. But I like to think of it as when you're on this plane, whether you're flying in first class, business, coach, or all the way back in economy where those seats don't lean back, we are all in this together. And if things go wrong, they will go wrong whether you are sipping champagne out of a glass or trying not to spill your AHA water in a paper cup way in the back. And there are a growing set of movements that go by many different names trying to get us to that destination. Some that you have heard or may hear include, as we've mentioned, pro-democracy or civic renewal. We may talk about building civic muscle, depolarization, the bridging movement. That's to just name a few. And so while various groups use various terms, at the core of all of this work, it comes back to that shared recognition that we can do better than what we're doing now. Where we don't always see agreement is on the how. How do we get to that destination and what is our best course?
So how do we chart that course? To understand that, we need to start coming down from that very high level, maybe to about 35,000 feet, which you start to see, things from a broader sort of the curvature of the Earth perspective. So let me pose a question to you, and we actually ask you to participate and maybe get ready to type something into the chat. When you think about how we can get to the thriving together destination we just described, what comes to mind? Okay, so get your fingers to the keyboard, go to the chat. When you think about how we can get to the thriving together destination we just described, what comes to mind to you?
And so, Mike, when you're asking the how, do you mean What types of approaches? What kind of activities?
Yes, and I'm speaking very broadly here. I see in the chat um, um, partnerships um, and any other thoughts? Do we see other things that come to mind that are critical to the thriving together conditions that we're trying to achieve?
I would add, thank you. Oh, wow. We're seeing some great responses coming in.
Empathy, community, conversation, those are all great. Thank you guys. All good.
Social networks. Yeah. Okay. This is great.
So so again, I think even for those of us in the ecosystem, that are working in these movements, it can be overwhelming. So many of movements, so many organizations, and many of them, frankly, with names that sound familiar. So we found that it's helpful to put things into a framework. A framework has enough detail to be accurate, but maybe not so much detail that it's overwhelming. And there's actually many frameworks out there describing the work that we're all doing, and many of them overlap. And we think that's a good thing. That means there's a lot of consensus and collaboration and agreement, but it can also be confusing. So I'll mention two of the frameworks just to give you a little sense of our community and our broader ecosystem. This first one is called from the Generate Democracy, and here's their version of how to get to the destination where we can all thrive together. And you can see the different components: civic engagement, social cohesion, structural reform. Those are all examples of the critical components. A second framework from our friend Sterling Spearn is the 7 elements of civic life framework to explain how we get to our goal through building trust and learning and innovation. These 7 elements highlight opportunities for funders and individuals who can integrate into the work at the local level. Place-based funders and people that are working, on the ground trying to get the work done, at in the various communities. So both of these frameworks are just two examples of ways to sort of look at a very high level overview of the ecosystem.
And don't worry if you don't have a chance to read everything that is on the screen. We will give you a chance to dive more deeply. But one more framework I want to share, and we'll go a bit deeper, is the 4Bs framework. This framework is used by our friends at the Horizons Project, and it builds on the work of John Powell and others. The 4Bs, as you can see on the screen here, stand for block, bridge, build, and belong. And each one is an approach that gets into that how of getting to our goal destination. Blockers focus on trying to stop harms, pushing back against harms, resistance. Some examples of that would be protests, nonviolent resistance, lawyers fit it in here, helping immigrants, those facing deportation, just as a few examples. Bridgers focus on connection, building trust, understanding across differences, and those differences may be social, racial, economic, political, cultural, religious, and so forth. Examples there would be having community dinners, bringing people together for mediated conversations, for coalition building. It gives you a sense of what the Bridger folks are doing. Build and builders are focusing on creating new things to either repair or replace the old. And what I mean by things are systems, institutions, policies, and laws. Examples of work within this of the 4Bs are citizen assemblies, participatory governance models, things that give people a real voice in decision making, or advocating for shifts in policies or for social systems that are based on fairness, building beyond what exists right now. And then that final B is a B that's sometimes forgotten, but it's incredibly important. Belonging refers to a country where everyone feels seen, included, respected. That goes beyond just being allowed in, but being invited in to co-create and share power. So I'm curious, as you're hearing those, you may already have a sense of the Bs. Like does it sound like maybe they're working in conflict or are they working in concert? And so to answer that question, I'm going to come down to 10,000 feet because all of this may sound really good at a high level, but here at 10,000 feet is where the landscape starts to look like a patchwork quilt you can see out the window. And we don't see all the finer details just yet, but I'm hoping that you'll hear a need for all four. Because after all, if you only block, you may stop immediate harms, but you don't often change the underlying systems that produce those harms in the first place. If you only bridge, you may create conflict, not opposite, you're creating connection, reducing conflict, but without systemic change, those inequalities and structural problems can remain. If you only build, you may design something new, but you lack that broad buy-in and support if people don't really trust or understand what's happening. And then bringing in belonging ensures that change is inclusive and sustainable. You want people to feel invested and that the new things that we're building, what we're creating in that new loop is co-created in a way that really reflects the whole community. So the fact is here that we need all all of these approaches, and we are going to run out of fuel in our plane if we keep bickering about the how and failing to see that we are all heading to the same place. So all we need to agree on here is that we need to get to the same destination and the fact that we need all nonviolent approaches available. And we specify nonviolent both because we condemn violence and because research shows that nonviolent approaches are far more effective. We specify all because, just like an airplane has many systems that are working in parallel to support safe travel, we've got air filtration, navigation, cabin pressure, propulsion, just to name a few. We need them all in this movement as well. And I really admire the work of Heidi and Guy Burgess, who say we need this massively parallel effort where lots of people are doing lots of different things all toward that shared goal. So you may have a sense already of which of the four Bs is a fit for you, but we want to talk about your role in more detail.
So by this point, you're starting to think about where you fit in. And to answer that, we're going down a little bit further to maybe 5,000 feet. And here's where you can start seeing some of the things on the ground, the towns, the cities. Those are the movements. You maybe can't make out all the buildings and structures. That's when you start getting down to the organizations. But you should be getting a good sense of the terrain and how it connects and starts to look like a community. When you're starting to see at this level are the movements within the pro-healthy democracy ecosystem. A good place to start navigating this system is by reviewing area topics or areas of focus, campaign finance reform, civic education, good governance. You can see the list. This is just a sampling of the topics. There's a wide range of areas of interest and concerns that can lead to action. And frankly, we need people interested in all of these, just like covering all the plane systems. So just as you quickly scan through this list, ask yourself, do any of these jump out at you? Or do any of these pique your curiosity, maybe your desire to learn more about these? So the categories of work that each of the organizations and groups that shape civic life, there's a broad list of categories that we would group a lot of this into, this ecosystem into: civic associations, civic learning, the media, technology, connecting, bridging, electoral reform, faith-based efforts, and on voter engagement. There's a whole slew of categories of the work that these organizations are doing. As we now go down to the next level, where we're actually looking at these topics and categories that you were just looking at that we can address, we're going to come down to this 1,000-foot level. And now you can start seeing those individual buildings and landmarks where these organizations within the movement. And we're very fortunate to have a map of our healthy ecosystem, our healthy democracy ecosystem that was been created by our friends at the National Civic League. It's a great place to start. This is the source of the topics and categories you just looked at. And you can connect with over 11,000 organizations that have already been mapped. You can find one in your backyard. You can find a national organization, again, that's working on a topic or a category that's of interest to you. There's online virtual options. In this overview presentation, we can't and go into the details of the on the ground work that's getting us to this shared destination. We're not going to land the plane today. For those of you that are in the movement, this is where we hand things over to you, as people decide where they want to land and what they might want to look into more. As people connect with you, you can share the details of your organization, your mission, your approach, your policies that you might be thinking to try to change.
So we're curious where everyone is now. If you remember where we started, practically everyone agreed that there is a problem, and we're in more agreement than we realize on what it is that we value. So we were all here. We are aware that there is a problem. We're hoping to move you into to care and want to be involved. And we know by virtue of you showing up to the webinar today, you do care and you do want to be involved. The next step is making sure that you feel connected and equipped. And I hope that for those who are new, we've moved you a bit in that direction, because then the final step here is feeling motivated and ready to act. And so if you are at that space, I ask you to think then, when you're ready, there are three different ways that you can contribute to this larger movement. And that is the three T's: your time, your talent, and your treasure. By time, we mean things like volunteering, showing up, whether that's in person or virtually, like on a webinar today. Your talent is thinking about your particular skill set. That may be something like cooking for people who need meals. It may mean helping a nonprofit set up their website, do accounting, anything, a skill set that you have that is needed somewhere. Maybe it means mediating challenging conversations. And then treasure is funding. This is particularly important these days as funding is so limited. And not everyone has all three. And of the three that you have, it may vary how you're contributing over the course of your life and career. The choices of participating that a parent of three young kids makes may look very different than a college student who's on summer break, which looks very different than someone who's recently retired from a long career. And so we're encouraging you to do what you can at the level that feels right and safe to you. One last thought before we move into Q&A today. Throughout this presentation, you likely noticed a theme. We were talking about civic engagement, civic renewal, civic muscle. And when you are involved in this work, there is a role that you are playing that is just not something that all of us always think about. And that is your role as citizen. And whether you live in an urban, rural, suburban area, on the beach, the forest, the desert, I had the joy of traveling around the country for many years during the COVID era. And it is truly awesome. I use that word in the real sense of the word, how varied we are across the country. And no matter where you are, there is a role, whether you're blocking, bridging, building, supporting belonging, whether you're giving of your time, your treasure, your talent, or all three. You are embracing your role as citizen. And I will tell you, as someone who started her career as a lawyer, I had a hard time with that word. It sounds to me sometimes still like a legal status, but I encourage you to think about this as an identity shift. And we'll include links to the work of Harry Boyd. He has done some amazing writing about the role of citizen. And the key point is so many of us see ourselves as consumers of government and consumers generally, which is a pretty apt thing to be thinking about on Black Friday. We need to shift into thinking of ourselves as contributors. And we want to leave you with the thought that citizenship is a relationship, and it is a reciprocal one between each of us and the country that we share. Former Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter once said of the United States that the highest office is the office of citizen. And many of us have forgotten that we hold this office, or we were never taught in the first place. As we enter 2026, we hope that you'll embrace that role and find ways, including with the organizations working with us on this shared destination, because getting to the shared future we all want is going to take all of us. Thank you, everyone. With that, we will move into Q&A. So as you have questions, big or small, any thoughts, we would love to hear them. And we'll turn to those questions in just a moment. I first want to ask what Mike noted at the beginning, and that is, what is one thing that stands out today in what we shared that is really sticking with you? Is there something that has shifted your thinking? And that may be a bigger shift. It may be something that is very, very small. So again, please put your fingers to your keyboard, um, move aside the leftovers if you've got those, and share with us in the chat if there's one thing, what of all the things that we've shared, what is standing out to you? And as you think about that and start to share in the chat, I'll note that we're going to prioritize questions from folks who are new to the movement. I mean, there may be some questions from folks who are working hard already at that 1,000-foot level. If we are limited for time, we'll get back to you later. We promise. But so that first question, I'd love to hear what is one thing that stands out to you? Is there something that shifted your thinking, even just a very small shift? So we'll see as those questions or comments start coming in. Mike, I'd love to start a question to you, and that is, as you know, we mentioned. I guess one question that we often get, I'll start with this one, is will you share the recording? And yes, hopefully that has been clear. And will we share a list of resources? Yes, and there will be a lot of reading material, everyone. So don't worry about that. That will be coming in. So Mike, if I can start with you, we have covered a lot today. And if there's one thing that stands out, what is it that you want people to take away from all that we've shared?
Well, one thing that we talked about the three T's and ways to contribute. And what I always think is important, and what I would hope at a minimum people leave hopefully this discussion with today, is an awareness of what's out there, and that it's not just that things are broken, and there's an awareness that there are solutions and that there are people and organizations working on those solutions. And frankly, even if people don't go all the way to the three T's and contribute their own time, treasure, talent, even their sharing their awareness would be, I think, a huge part of keeping our movement and expanding our awareness to the broader public, if you will, to just start imagining a future that could be different. That's what I would hope everybody at a minimum takes away, is that sharing of the
Mhm.
awareness that they've learned today. Um, so
I love that, Mike. Yeah, and I think it's so important because we can miss that good news. There's a lot. We didn't touch on social media algorithms and the rage economy, but bringing that good news is something that we really can't underestimate. Sharing with people that there is a lot of work underway, that there is a lot more agreement than we realize. I'm seeing some good comments here in the chat. Thanks, folks, that there's appreciation for the framing of all this in altitude. It was helpful for us to think through, let's go that big picture and take it down. And then taking all the nonviolent approaches. Yes, thank you for flagging that. Of all the sources we'll share, I think that research is probably the one that stands out to me the most. Please don't be shy, everybody. If you've got questions in the Q&A, anything
I
and
think we want
everything.
to open it up more broadly to any comments or questions, if you
Mhm,
have any. Um, you know, Especially, it looks like time is good. We're doing well. So
mhm.
if anybody has um, thoughts they want to share, I don't know if we can, Piper, if we can unmute people if they
We
want.
can. Yeah, yeah. If there's something you'd like to share aloud, just type that in the chat. I think you're also able to directly message the host and panelists. Feel free to do that. Yeah, it's funny, everybody. We were a bit nervous about whether we could get this into, all that we covered in a short amount of time. And virtual high five, Mike. I think we did. We left plenty of time for for Q&A. Um,
And we do want almost more of a discussion. I'm honestly thinking of this opportunity now and this part to be almost more like a focus group. So if you have honest, just reactions, thoughts, comments, suggestions, either we'd love to get them now in real time while they're fresh. Anybody has anything that jumps out at them?
Yeah, and I'd echo that. I mean, whether it's as a, someone who's deeply, deeply involved or if you put on that newbie hat, what are things that we didn't cover? What are things that you feel like would be more helpful? And if you are new to this, then that feels you know, all the more authentic. And all right, awesome. Ace, thank you for volunteering to come off mute. We've got our fabulous tech support in the background. Rebecca, can you take Ace off mute and we'll hear your thoughts?
I am on it.
Awesome, thank you.
Should be good to go.
Hi, and happy
Hello.
Black Friday.
Thank you for
Um,
celebrating with us.
I guess. Well, th thank you so much for the presentation. I guess like what I found missing. And what I find missing from I'll say one thing like that I found missing, but then I'll also ask for a resource if you have it. The thing that I found missing is I feel like a lot of bridging conversations, really well-meaning, miss the sludge that's coming into the water. So we talk about like we need more affirmative examples of bridging and that we need to be kind of the change we seek to be in the world. And I have my Gandhi shirt on, so I believe in that, but I also think that it's sort of like seeing a river and we're trying to like look at like the clear water here while there's like sludge pouring in. And it
Mm,
makes me wonder whether we ever take on the social media enterprises and things like that that are pouring the sludge in, rather than the individual human beings who are kind of falling prey to it. So that would be my one that I didn't see in there. And the resource that I wanted to ask is I think that often in the social media ecosystem, we get into a state of like caricaturing.
mm,
So, for example, I'm an immigrant. Some on the right would like the way that they characterize immigrants are like rapists and murderers or whoever, and I support refugee families. We support Afghan families that came as refugees, and now you see kind of like in light of the shooting, the things that have happened here. Like, what are the resources that you have for that affirmative storytelling and in ways that empower um, regular humans, Homo sapiens, to be able to change that narrative? And whether you have specific resources or things that you found useful. So, thanks for hearing all that.
absolutely. And thanks for sharing it, Ace.
Yes, thank you. I want to respond more broadly just first before we respond specifically to your great thoughts and question. I just I think your example in your question was great, and it also highlights the challenge that you know you're doing exactly what we would hope anyone participating in this would do, whether they're new or whether they've been in the space. But be curious, think about something that's passionate, might be of interest and passion to you, and engage that kind of discussion and conversation. I think you appreciate that. There, I did the math, and our challenge in trying to keep an overview of our whole ecosystem down to this roughly 20 minutes is really um, um, a um, a challenge, as you can imagine. And even today, we probably went a little over 20 minutes of the actual presentation portion of it. But I did the math. I shared this with Piper before the call. If you just say, that every organization that's doing any of the work in this ecosystem wants to get in front of us and has their own 1 hour presentation they would do just on the work their organization is doing. If you just sat and listened to every one of those presentations, those 11,000 plus organizations, um, if you sat there and listened to a presentation every hour for 24 hours a day, it would take you about 15 months to listen to every one of those 11,000 presentations. So I'm obviously just making a general point that we are trying hard to, in this presentation, just raise awareness that the community exists, that the ecosystem exists, and get to, you know, people then to want to pursue that deeper dive into the kinds of areas that you just brought up, Ace, and the kinds of questions like that. So you bring up a great question about and Neil put in a specific comment of tackling the sludge. Thank you, Neil.
Mhm.
Pacific Health Project has shared. So I just wanted to share that general comment and thanking you again for coming off mute and sharing your question.
Yeah.
I didn't know,
I,
Piper, you wanted to respond to the specific question.
I do. And I so appreciate that the visual, as you're saying, like I have this, I'm imagining that the Mississippi, just because that's a river I'm most familiar with, and having just a part of it have that clear, healthy water and more sludge being pushed in by social media, and I think there's been some really great research about where that's coming from. And so much of it is outside of the United States. And yet all this toxicity being pushed in by different accounts is changing our perception of each other. It's changing, individually the things we see, the way we feel, and then in turn the way we're interacting with each other. So I see an overlap in the questions, specifically the social media sludge, and then how we're seeing each other. And I think that there's, like so much of what we're doing, there's not one particular solution. I wish that there were. I wish there were one thing we can do and just turn off the sludge and be done. But we all know it's more complicated than that. And so I think absolutely there's a role for pushing back against the social media companies who are allowing this. It's in their interest to have the more engagement there is, the more money there is to be made. And so it's in a financial interest to have algorithms that keep people angry. That's the stuff that gets more engagement than the happy, hopeful type content. And so that's where, as small as it may seem, sharing more of that hopeful content where we are online. And thank you, Neil, for the Civic Health Project's new Normsy AI. I don't know if it's still in the beta testing, or I think that you can sign up and form an account. That's one way of using AI to push back on disinformation and misinformation. And so that I can picture now with your metaphor, Ace, of clearing out making more clear space in the river and pushing back against the sludge. Another part is taking more time offline and having real connection, which that is again, a massive shift. I mean, we live, especially coming out of 2020 and pandemic years, so much isolation, so much time alone, putting down our devices and having that real connection. And Don, I'm seeing yes, the analogy of the river living upstream and downstream. I think also of that story of, people throwing things in the river. You can stand there and take things out, or you can go upstream and say, what the heck is causing this? And so we need all of us. We need people going upstream and turning off the source. We also need people clearing out downstream. And I think that gets into, and this is a question after my own heart, the stories change power. You might suspect we love stories. And so thinking about stories and ways we can complicate the narrative, ways we can have people better understand each other and get past the harmful stereotypes and really get to know each other. And so I think the short answer is that there's a combination of things that we need to do, both online and offline, both upstream and downstream. And so it is, I wish there were a simpler answer, but I think, and this is something we dig into in a lot of our short courses, is looking at how do we tell more ethical stories? How do we tell more helpful stories? And really share more of the reality, because we know that sludge coming in is simplifying and toxifying and making people very angry.
So I just want to add also, I know we have some of my fellow Rotarians have joined us today, and I just want to lift up the work they're doing under the Democracy in a Box and the community of Rotarians within our ecosystem called the Rotarians for Civic Participation. I lift that up as an example of one of many of the people and groups within our movement who have the opportunity to connect outside of our movement with their community. And I mentioned at the very beginning the idea of Rotary clubs. And we do plan, I hope it's clear by now, to continue to refine. This was the very first time we beta tested this version of the presentation, and our hope is to continue to get feedback and update the presentation, but with the intent to share this and share this widely, or at least the idea of the presentation to encourage us to be reaching, outside of our bubble, outside of our community, to make more people aware that our pro-healthy democracy ecosystem even exists. And so, again, I'm personally hoping at some point to do this with my own Rotary Club, but I purposely was waiting to do this a few times, or at least a couple of times, to get, to get it, some of the message refined. So I encourage everyone to be thinking about that, especially if you're already active in the movement, in the ecosystem, be thinking about communities. I can think of several others right off the top of my head. I know we have a whole new community of former the federal workers and the work they're doing. I think this kind of presentation, I would think, would be helpful to them to get this overview of the broader work that's happening here in the United States and in our ecosystem. So please, if there's others questions or thoughts that anyone else would like to share as we wrap up. I don't know, Piper, if we have more time for that.
We have a bit, and I wanted to see if Ace, we would love to hear your thoughts and responses to the response if you'd like. I never want to put anybody on the spot, but welcome that if you'd like. I will okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the values that are behind the answer. I do think that there's something a little bit more systemic and maybe like actually simpler than we would otherwise think. Like simply, I think to me, like if you hold the social media companies accountable in the same way that we hold our New York Times and other media companies for slander, for putting things
Mm,
out there that are patently untrue or that like have some sort of a standard within that and that hold them economically liable for that. I do think that that would actually have an enormous impact on because they can adjust the algorithms. Like the algorithms
yeah.
are not like the sun. They're algorithms and they can if you made it in their economic interest to change the algorithms, they would.
Yeah.
So I do think like I think that everything that you're mentioning about being a good human, that like we should all strive for that, every one of us, and when we fail, we should try to do better. My concern though is that sometimes we think asking people to do the things that being a
Mm,
good share the positives misses out on the structural reality
yeah.
that creates the environment and the ecosystems that we have. And until we address those structural realities, we're at a deep disadvantage and may not be able to overcome it.
I appreciate that so much. I find myself saying often, like, I wish I lived in a world where everyone fill in the blank. And then it's my way of reminding myself we do not live in that world. And there was a great conversation I heard. I will find this and add it to the resources about the contrast. And Mike, as someone who knows construction, you'll appreciate this. We regulate, and I'm saying we collectively like regulate building like at every single stage, as we should. We want people to, well, let me not say should, because some would argue that it's overregulated, but that there is a need for safety in our physical buildings. The level of regulation, we can debate that another time. But when it comes to the online world, it is the wild, wild west. And there's that's also a whole conversation about, if we look at Congress, how aware, how able are they to understand, what's actually happening. So Asa, that's just a long way of saying I agree. And I think we again collectively and those who are in the places of power to put in regulations, we need those. And it's not, I think I don't want to suggest for a second that we just sit back and say, well, the algorithms are what they are. We can't change. 100% agree that that
Thank you,
is
Piper.
needed. Yeah, thank you for flagging that. I think that the last thing I would just again thank everybody for joining us today. There will be another opportunity if there's more questions that come up. We are here anytime. As you log off, there will be a 15-second poll that pops up. Please share your feedback. We really value that, and that informs other webinars. Speaking of other webinars, December 12th, which is an idealist day, 12/12, I'll explain what that is next month. But Ken Powley from Team Democracy will be joining us, and would love for you to join us for that conversation as we look ahead for strategies in 2026. Next Tuesday is Giving Tuesday. If you are on our newsletter list, we have promised not to spam your email. We will keep that promise, but we are looking for 26 superstars by the end of this year to support this webinar series. We keep it free so that everyone can join. If you are able to donate, we're looking for 26 people. I think we're up to 8. So even a $10 donation, one by one, would get us up to that goal. For now, thank you again, everyone, for making time today. Be well, do good, stay hopeful, and we will be in touch. Thanks, Mike.